All right, so welcome everyone to the Empowering Men of Color webinar. My name is Dr. Adrian Huerta, and I'm an assistant professor of education in the Pullias Center for Higher Education at USC, where I study boys and men of color, college access and equity, and gang youth. This year marks the 25th anniversary of the Pullias Center, which is a leading research center focused on student access and success in higher education. Today, we're very excited to host you and 300 colleagues from around the country to discuss best practices and strategies on how to support men of color in four-year universities. I want to give a quick shout out to viewing parties at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and Wayne State University for doing your viewing parties, and also colleagues at the University of Texas, San Antonio, Oregon State, North Carolina, Central University, and many others. This webinar is part of a larger research project that is generously funded by the ECMC Foundation to understand how 5 men of color programs function, serve, and support their students in public state universities. In that project, we have interviewed close to 150 students, faculty, staff, and university leadership to understand how those programs work and are supported and align with institutional and state graduation goals. With that said, this webinar does not reflect any views or opinions of the ECMC Foundation. Before we start, I just want to do a little housekeeping. If and when you have a question, please chat or message our QA facilitation team, who can assist you and record your questions for the Q&A segment. Please know that we've blocked off a generous amount of time at the end of the presentation for Q&A with our brilliant panelists from around California. We have Doctors Alejandra Acuña from California State University, Northridge, Craig Elliott from Samuel Merritt University and current president of ACPA, and Vincent Harris, who is from California State University, Fullerton. We are also providing closed captioning function, and you can locate that option at the bottom of your screen with the CC insignia. Feel free to use the hashtag PulliasMOC and include the handle at USC Pullias, as we will be live tweeting during this webinar. So first, I think it's important for us to set a context for why we need to develop men of color programs in California and beyond. So please review the following figure from the National Center for Educational Statistics. You see that first-time freshmen graduation rates are at or near 50% for male, Latino, Pacific Islanders, Native American, and at a troubling 34% for Black males. Over the last 15 years, scholars have focused on feelings of mattering and marginalization, sense of invisibility and or belonging, vanishing from the educational pipeline to highlight how K through 12 and higher education systems need to rethink and retool their practices to create structured and scaffold opportunities for boys and men of color. It is important to highlight that for the Asian category, I don't believe that those numbers fully capture the experiences of Cambodian, Hmong, Vietnamese, and other Southeast Asian male experiences in higher education institutions, which require additional attention from researchers and scholars and practitioners. So I just want to highlight our quick agenda that we're doing. So it's pretty straightforward that you can see how we're setting up this webinar. It is important for me to highlight that within the CSU system, we have almost 10 men of color programs, if not a couple more that have emerged in the last year. However, all these programs are unique and funded differently to support their students. And today we will learn about two of those programs. Now I'm going to mute myself so that Dr. Alejandra Acuña and her students can share their insights about California State University, Northridge.
Good afternoon, can you hear me? Okay, good afternoon, my name is Alejandra Acuña and I'm here to talk about the Minority Male Mentoring, or M3 program, a multi-tiered model for college success established at the California State University, Northridge since 2016. I've also invited Jeremiah, David, and Eric, M3 mentors, to join me in telling you about their experiences with M3. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here's a little bit more about the multi-tiered aspect of the M3 program. At the tier 1 or universal level, we offer school-wide strategies like the poster stories that you see behind us. Tier 2, we are students, and at the tier 1 or intensive level, we offer one-on-one mentoring. Next slide, please. So in the interest of time, Dr. Huerta has asked me to highlight in some depth our experiences offering voluntary stress screening and support. So I wanted to share with you some of the results. I think this is there's a slide before this. Okay, never mind. So the results of the screening, so we recruited students to participate and the screener asked questions or items about stress-related symptoms. And so the flyer was targeting men of color, but it didn't turn anyone away. And so as a result, 65 students completed the online screener and 43 of the students were male. So just looking at the male students, we see that 50% reported trouble concentrating almost always or half the time, which is easy to imagine how this might impact learning and student success. 57% reported not feeling close to people around them. And this is concerning given what we know about the importance of belonging to student success. Next slide, please. Further, 40% reported feeling like future plans or hopes would not come true, and 46 reported feeling irritable or having fits of anger, which we know is also an indicator of depression. Next slide, please. So this is the flyer that we use to recruit students to participate in the online stress screening survey and also the coping and resilience groups. And so as you can see, we're clearly targeting men of color on campus, but we don't turn anyone away. And we were very happy to see 28 students out of about 52 participate in our coping and resilience groups. The group leaders, and Jeremiah, David, and Eric will talk about their experiences. The group leaders were men of color and grad students. And the groups were held on campus, either in classrooms or in faculty offices. All taken together, I think, helped with making the groups feel more naturalistic because they were offered in a naturalistic setting and less stigmatizing. Next slide, please. So these are some of the topics. The curriculum that we used is actually an adaptation of an evidence-based trauma-specific curriculum called Cognitive Behavior Intervention for Trauma in Schools, or CBITS for short. And we adapted it, the manual, and created a 6-session curriculum. And we covered relaxation exercises, psychoeducation about stress reactions, how to automatic negative thoughts, avoidance and coping, and social problem solving. So although we had some dropouts, we also found that a significant number of participants reported, oh, thank you. So the noises are coming from us. I thought they were coming from, okay, thanks for letting us know. Sorry about the shuffling and the noises. We're not moving, so I'm not sure, but okay, we'll be mindful. So anyway, the drop-off, we did see attrition in the groups, but for those who participated at least 3 or more times, we did find significant reductions in PTSD symptoms from pre to post intervention. And what was really cool is that we saw the reductions even 1 year after. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we also, in addition to running the coping and resilience groups, we ran, that's definitely our noise. One of our posters fell. Focus groups, basically asking young men of color on campus, what gets you through? With everything you've been through, what gets you up in the morning? And so I'm gonna ask David to read this quote, please.
It says, so what gets me up every morning or what gets me going is like, I dream every night or like every day that my family is not gonna have to struggle anymore and it's gonna be good. That my 2 nieces are gonna grow up and not have to work while going to college, even during high school to help their mom. So stuff like that keeps me going.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So one of the themes that really stood out to me was students who acknowledge the importance of purposeful vulnerability to student success. And so I'm going to ask, here we go. So I'm going to ask Jeremiah, will you read this quote, please?
I think I broke out of the shell where I wasn't afraid to ask questions. You know, the second I said F it. And yeah, I don't know. I'm a student. Like, what up? You know, the professors explain something and I don't get it. And explain it again. Most importantly, ask. Always ask. Can't be afraid to not know. Be wrong.
Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to now hand it over to our F3 mentors, and I just want to acknowledge that they have been either participants or mentors in our program, and so they're going to share with you some experiences they've had in running the coping and resilience groups.
My name is Jeremiah, and I'm a former mentor, mentee, and I just want to talk a little bit about my experience with the group. What I really noticed from the mentees was the different intersectional experiences. What I mean by that is some of them grew up in single-parent households, others are first-generation college students, and some are even primary caretakers for their own family. But I do want to share that I noticed one common theme among the participants, and that theme was fear of vulnerability, fear of not fitting in at an educational institute, and fear of success in higher education. They described struggling in the classroom setting, feeling afraid to approach professors, raise their hand in class. The mentees did mention, however, that M3 helped them feel like they were not alone in their struggles because other group members shared similar experiences. I actually remember during my senior year in my undergrad, M3 coming to my class to present. What really stood out was when they stated that men of color are the highest groups that enroll into college but do not graduate. I knew the struggle of completing a 4-year degree in 8 years and wanting to quit along the way because I felt like I didn't belong. My mentors at M3 and the professors at M3 really provided me with that confidence to feel like I could thrive at an educational institute and really realize my potential. So today I stand here 3 months away from graduating with a master's degree in social work. And it's all to thanks of, being able to build those relationships and soon planning to pursue a doctorate degree. So I really think that male initiative groups are important to help you feel like you're not alone while navigating this process.
That's my turn. Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Science. I'm a current mentor at Minority Male Mentoring. I come from 2 parents who are first-generation immigrants who didn't have the opportunity to finish high school. Fortunately, they valued education. And while I had the ideal environment to foster values that eventually led me to grad school, I quickly learned during grade school that I was pretty much by myself. And so that, I had difficulty with anxiety during high school. And my parents not really being able to be there for me because they had to juggle jobs. And they didn't understand most of the content that I was learning anyway, so they didn't really know how to help me or guide me through my schoolwork. at school, my teachers, I didn't feel like I could raise my hand, like I could ask questions and make mistakes. They didn't foster that environment. And so when I entered my professional career, once I got my undergrad, once I got my BA, I had to learn how to overcome my anxiety, while I was already a professional. And so I mention this to you because I'm vulnerable to you, because a lot of the students that I talk to, in fact, pretty much all the students that I mentioned this to, they tell me that this story resonates with them. And so, you know, if they're in the same situation as I am and they have less privileges, less protective factors than I am, I can only imagine how hopeless they must feel.
So my name is David Chino Contreras. I am a current master's student at CSUN. I was a participant of a recruiter and a facilitator for the CBT groups. I learned 3 different perspectives. The first one as a participant was that asking for help and having a mentor there or having a support system there was crucial for my survival in undergrad. As a recruiter, I noticed that not a lot of males of color really ask for help when it's needed. And what I noticed as a facilitator was that these spaces needing to give this form of therapy, this form of outcome, this form of output for these males of color was crucial, not only for the survival through the institution, through higher education, but for their survival as males of color throughout society. And that's my perspective.
Okay, so we don't want to step on other people's time, so we're gonna stop. Do we have more time?
You have 1 more minute for final thoughts or ideas.
Yeah, so I just want to say, please feel free to reach out to us, get connected. You have our social media handles. We have a website. We have Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And I just want to say, if you're interested in some of the posters that we have, we asked faculty, students, alum, men of color to share with us their academic journeys, both the ups and the downs. And so we created this poster series, and they're available to anybody who's interested via PDF, color PDFs for download if you'd like to post them. And I just want to ask the young men to share some of we asked the men of color on campus to tell us what impact the poster stories have had on them. And so the men are going to just read 1 quote each.
So after reading all the poster stories, I saw myself and was able to relate and hope to see myself holding a bachelor's degree and be in a master's program. It inspired me to reflect on myself and develop my work ethic like the people on the posters.
The posters inspire me to ask for help and take my academics seriously. I can relate to those experiences and need support for stress and to retain my education.
If I could see them graduating, then so can I.
So thank you. And yeah, like I said, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Dr. Acuna and your M3 students for sharing their reflections about the program. Now I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Vincent Harris from the Male Success Initiative program at California State University, Fullerton. Dr. Harris, all you.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, cool. Can you hear me now? All right, cool. All right, hello everybody, my name is Dr. Vincent Harris. Just gonna walk you through our program here at Cal State University Fullerton and how we're moving forward with accessing our brother's potential here. We're not gonna have time to really watch our video today, but if the slides can, we're getting it together. Hold up. Okay, there we go. We're not gonna have time to watch our video today, but if you want to, this really does set the context for our program, and it provides you a good place to start when it comes to knowing what we do. Our next slide we're going to look at gives you a touch base on what the presentation will be about today. We're going to talk about prioritizing the needs for men of color here and what that looks like at Cal State Fullerton, the difference between our success program and our scholars program. We're going to really unpack the cohort model and what that looks like with our curriculum, share some brief data, and then talk through what our space looks like now that we have a space for men of color here at Cal State Fullerton. One of the first things to really touch base with is how we all started. We started from this idea of a pilot program that was created based off of a white paper initiative. And there was some passionate faculty and staff on campus to really find the need to learn how to support African-American men specifically. That program transitioned into a full-time department when I was hired as the inaugural director in fall of 2016 to expand on supporting all men of color. But it's important for me to always note that we started with the idea to support African-American men. By the fourth year, we were able to hire 3 full-time staff, including me, senior program coordinator and a department admin coordinator. We also have full-time student staff and part-time staff on board. But after building the team over the time, we had to start with the mission. And so the mission is something that is rooted in what we call at Cal State Fullerton our Division of Student Affairs. And I might need help with the slides if USC is on. Okay, next, thank you. Our mission is rooted within the Department of Division of Student Affairs, and we're centered in retention and graduation, rather than just diversity as a whole awareness. And we're a fully inclusive brotherhood that involves men of all identities, men of trans experience, and men who self-identify as a man. It's important for us to note that, particularly here when we're entering into this type of work. Next slide. We're going to talk about now the difference between our scholars program and fellows program. Our scholars program really does have the scholarship part to it. So we can only pick 15 scholars per semester, and it's a first-time freshman only program. Our fellows program is an opt-in program open to all students, not just our men of color, open to all students, but mostly tailored to our men of color, and any classification can join. So the next slide is how we're going to establish the benchmark to create the Success Scholars Program. We looked at all of our men of color, and we noticed that there was not a GPA that was above a 3.0. So the important part is that we established that as a benchmark, and we weren't gonna do the bare minimum, and we used a counter-narrative approach from student development theory, folks like Tyrone Howard, Sean Harper, Yoso, and my research to really note that we needed to go above the narrative. And the next slide shows you that our men of color GPA is above a 3.0, and that means that our brothers are achieving what they need to achieve based off of the categories of support systems. So if we go back one slide, we really unpack what does it mean to be in the Scholars Program. Our Scholars Program is consisted of 3 cohorts, and right now we're at a 91% retention rate, which is 18% above our overall male retention rate. Each of our Success Scholars receive $12,000 over the course of 4 years, $3,000 per year, $1,500 per semester. And the eligibility is based off of their academic performance, their leadership engagement, and their service. And just to note, this scholarship is available to all admitted Cal State Fullerton students. However, we tailor our program, whoever selected, to men of color. So the next slide will tell you a little bit more about our ethnicity approach. It's important to note that our critical ethnicity that we want to highlight was our critical students. And so being at an HSI, most of our brothers are Latino Hispanic, and that's amazing. Additionally, our second largest group is our African-American brothers, which is actually one of our lowest men of color populations on campus. So we're countering that narrative to make sure that we have an equitable selection process. Right now, you can see at that time we had 11 on the Dean's List. Out of 45, right now we have 17 on the Dean's List, and we're keeping the move, we're pushing that forward. The next slide will tell you a little bit about how our brothers look as a whole. We weren't able to get all the voices, but please take some time and read the voices of our brothers and what that means to be in this type of program. And as you can see, we focus on not a homogeneous identity of men of color, but all men of color. And our brothers are from various majors, and largely there are some majors where we're not, and that's where we're looking to make sure that we can include more of those brothers within our program. Our next slide will tell you about the Fellows program. It's an opt-in program, and it allows for our brothers to choose to be selected into the program on their own. There's a 6-step program that we've modeled based off of our program coordinator, Brother George Parker's work with Cal State Dominguez Hills to make it an opt-in program. They receive everything outside of the scholarship services for our brothers. So now we're going to dive through the curriculum through MSI. Our curriculum starts and structured around 4 pillars. And the next slide will tell you what those pillars are: academic coaching, tailored mentoring, leadership engagement and development, career trajectory, and gender masculinity. These are based off of student development theory, research that I previously mentioned, and housed with the purpose of retention, graduation, and growth. So we start this and we embed it with the next slide showing you our curriculum throughout the year through our programs. We have programs in the spring and programs in the fall that are tailored for men of color, student-facing programs, scholar-facing programs, and community engagement programs. And we unpack this throughout the following ways. So first of all, the next slide tells you our academic coaching model. Our upperclassmen, who will be our juniors and seniors, mentor our underclassmen, our first and second years, and they focus on academic coaching, transitioning into college, personal life, and also they're like a resource kiosk for our brothers. Our next slide shares with you how we focus on leadership, engagement, and development. It's so crucial that brothers are invested on campus. You just can't come to school, you gotta also be involved. And we note that by requiring all of our brothers to be involved in at least one activity outside of MSI, we take them on conference travel trips to encourage networking and impact them in their career. We also have a brotherhood collective that's recently joined and as a student group on campus. The next slide tells you about our service. MSI really focuses on community service, and each year we welcome over close to 300 men of color from across Southern California to see what it does, see what it means to be a man of color on campus like Cal State Fullerton. And every year we're involving our success scholars and our fellows into the planning stages so that they're understanding that the 32 hours of community service just aren't showing up and standing, they're actually doing. And one of our wrap-ups pillars in the middle is our next slide. Our 3rd year process is really tailored to the career trajectory. This allows for our brothers to realize that first impressions are important when you're going to the job interview, when you're showing up for the internship. And we've had a Suited for Success program, and we're tailoring that now into a career portfolio program that we're working specifically with our 3rd years to develop that as they transition post-graduation. And last pillar, but not least, is gender and masculinity. We cannot do this work without talking about the next slide. What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a man of color? What does it mean to be a man of color going to school in Orange County? And what does that look like? And so this is where our brothers are vulnerable. They learn to be vulnerable, and that builds trust for us. That trust equals them being able to ask more questions and ask for help. And then that continues the process of retention. And it all starts at our brother retreat every fall to really crack open those doors to talk to those brothers about what does it mean to be who they are and who they're becoming. And lastly, our progress has moved forward to the next slide. We're able to really be proud of our physical space. Next slide. And it shows where we're going. So our physical space is, next slide, the MSI Pullias Center. We were able to open this up in spring of 2019, and it is an amazing space for our brothers to come to campus and see themselves. It's so important that we realize that, yeah, it's a microwave space that they can take a nap, they can use the refrigerator, but honestly, it's a space where they can see themselves presently in person on the walls and have a sense of belonging. And again, we're at a public institution in the CSU system, the largest system of higher ed in the country, and the largest Cal State, the largest university. everybody can come to our center, but we will unapologetically always highlight the stories of men of color. And that's what creates that sense of belonging when it comes to supporting our brothers. As you can see, we have a Brotherhood corner space in the bottom right-hand corner. There's a space where we're watching the webinar right now. Hopefully they're in there. And free printing and a lounge space for our brothers to connect is really important. So continue to keep engaged with MSI Fullerton. The next slide shares with you some of our contact information. Our Facebook and Instagram and Twitter are very similar. And you have my handles there. And we really just want to continue to be a place where men of color can achieve the fullness of their potential. And we hope we're doing that with our team here.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Harris, for providing us a rich perspective on the MSI program at your university. You and Dr. Acuna are really doing amazing work to help empower men of color on your campuses. Now I'm going to pass the digital mic to Dr. Craig Elliott, who's the current president of ACPA and AVP at Samuel Merritt University in Northern California.
Thanks, Dr. Huerta, Dr. Harris, and Dr. Acuna. Fantastic, phenomenal work that you're all doing. It's just profound work. And I appreciate too that we heard voices from our students who are really storytelling about why this work on our campuses matter. So I think some takeaways and reflections that I have, one, what I think is powerful about these programs on our campuses, and in particular these two, it's just about how you are creating opportunities for belonging and spaces, what I'll call home, spaces where you can come and as Dr. Harris said, see yourself reflected. Visibility matters, and being able to unapologetically find your stories and places of comfort and home make such a huge difference. I love how what Dr. Acuna talked about purposeful vulnerability. And I think that's so powerful, especially when we talk intersections of race and gender, about helping people navigate, I think, systems that weren't built for them and then aren't always safe for them, but that we know that engaging in the educational experience matters. And so until we can change the system, I think creating opportunities for students of color, in particular men of color, to show up and be present and be purposefully vulnerable and so that they can get the experiences that they need and the attention that they need. I think the other takeaway that I had kind of in thinking about the systems is these are phenomenal programs and centers in inequitable, unjust, oppressive systems. And so higher education is an oppressive system. The country we live in is an oppressive system. And so I'm thinking about how do we also take our opportunity to do the systems work? How do we transform our campuses to become environments that are more supportive and are home for students of all identities? And so I think about, like, we need our partners in that, and I think about that. All of us, we all haven't done our work, our self-work, to be able to show up in those spaces and be good partners. But I know our campuses also haven't had these kinds of holistic conversations about what do we as a campus need to do to change and shift the way that we do things to make this campus more inclusive, create better spaces for belonging, and create opportunities for people to thrive around here. And I think about that. Even myself, that I think I'm thoughtful. I think I am well-intended. I think I have some degree of some consciousness, and even I am aware of how I participate in the wearing down of my colleagues and the students that are on my campus. It's important that I continue to remember and reflect about that every time I show up to work, every time I do interact with a student and connect with our colleagues in terms of shaping our educational environment so that it continues to be parallel to the work that's being done with these centers on campus. And then I think about, so how do we build capacity? How do we have faculty learn how to teach and engage men of color in particular differently in the classroom? And how do we evolve our practices and our policies so that they continue to be, so that they're supportive and contributing to the thriving rather than contributing to the wearing down of. And so I think really that's the next step of this work, is that for us to begin to link our efforts in partnership and find ways that we can begin to make some headway on our systems that aren't the kind of educational environments that we want, and that don't have such a disparity of outcomes to some populations and not others. So there's a lot of really great work out there. ACPA and NASPA both are doing some great work. And again, I think our two examples from Dr. Acuna and Dr. Harris and Dr. Huerta, there's amazing work being done. And like, I want us to be able to pay attention. How are we supporting the departments and the centers that we have and the work of these programs, but also doing our work to be able to shift our systems and building alliances and partnership, and getting leadership to pay attention and value it and fund it so that we can do the good work.
Thank you so much, Craig, for sharing your thoughts and reflections and what we need to really do in order to, one, to not just empower men of color, but also the staff and faculty that are working with these students, helping them navigate these campuses, raise their GPAs, and ultimately lead them to graduation and career success. With that, I'm going to transition over to the next slide, where we're going to do Q&A. For any individuals that have Q&A, please, or any questions, please send those questions to our Q&A admin. We have a team of individuals helping facilitate this process so we can collect questions. All right, so just to read a few questions here to share with you all. Okay, and this is for anyone. For men of color who are navigating sexual identity and may not have disclosed to folks, what does support look like, knowing that they may not have disclosed this information to others?
I can start with that question. We really take pride in being an inclusive brotherhood, and it's important to start with being an example. Like me as a Black gay male, it's important for my brothers to know that right up front, because I think it removes that barrier. And even if the director of the program doesn't identify with the LGBT community, being as vulnerable and honest and showing that as an example will then keep the door open. Now, I highly recommend, and research also shows that you don't want to press the issue, but allowing a space to be vulnerable, allowing a space to be open, then when that brother decides to come forward and to include you into their life, then the door is open instead of closed. So I would just really encourage practicing vulnerability, practicing strategies where your brothers can continue to be open regardless of what the topic is.
Dr. Acuna, would you like to supplement or add anything to that question?
Thanks, Dr. Huerta. One of our M3 mentors, David Contreras, is going to say a few words about that.
So I know in regards to like sexual identity, not disclosing, I know within male culture, there's this sense of hypermasculinity and masculinity, right? But being able to provide a safe space in these programs is necessary. And I know as someone who has family part of LGBTQ community, not specifically males, but as a heterosexual male, being able to provide that space, being able to provide that identity, being able to provide that, like, I'm heterosexual, I'm understanding, I'm here for you type of mentality and space is necessary for, like you mentioned, right? Like our brothers, our gente, our people. And I think just being able to provide that safe space is necessary within all aspects, especially for males of color who have not come out and who have not shared.
Thank you.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. Next question. Could someone speak to the potential strategies to implement seek institutional support versus one-off grant opportunities? So if you all can talk a little bit maybe about your funding.
So we actually start off with a really small, and when I say small, like $31,000 from campus quality fee from our student affairs department. And then our College of the Social Behavioral Sciences matched that with another 31,000. So we've been operating off of that for the last 4 years. And so we're looking at external funding, but we have lots of in-kind. So we have social work interns, we have multidisciplinary faculty, we have volunteers from the community. So at this point, we've been operating from some small pots of money and lots of in-kind and volunteer efforts.
In regards to MSI Fullerton, similarly, our program started as an initiative with little to no funding and grew into a department. And so I feel like that's super important too, to note that we're no longer a program, we are a full department with that university. So the resources are set within the university's framework. So I can't really unpack where our scholarship dollars come from, but they are appropriately used within our department. And our programming budget ranges anywhere only between $10,000 and $50,000, and that is inclusive of our programs, inclusive of our activities and our retreats and some of our travel. Recently, though, since I've been hired, we have been working with university advancement to secure external grants, to work with alumni, community leaders, and donors. And we, as of spring last year, finally opened up our philanthropic account. And so go to our website and donate if you would like, because it would allow us to do a lot more accessible programs that aren't restricted with state funds. And when we have soft funds, we can really grow and do a little bit more and be creative and innovative with those funds.
And I think just to offer also data. Know who your students are. I think Dr. Harris showed a really just phenomenal slide in the beginning, talk about GPAs. And so unfortunately, what works for a lot of our higher ed administrators on our campuses is data. And so I think learning to speak their language, while we are also bringing the stories, the really important stories to couple with that. But I think I found that what has worked on my campus to get funding and support and buy-in from upper level administrators is being able to say, here's what we're looking at. Here's the graduation rate by race and ethnicity. Here's the graduation rate by gender. And here it is by orientation. And it's so clear the disparities that we have on our campus that we were able to quickly get the support that we need. The challenge then is how do we sustain that support? And that's a different question, but I think to help people see and hear and feel the culture and climate at your campus, the data is coupled with storytelling.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, everyone. Some individuals are curious to know about academic faculty buy-in and the relationship between academic affairs and student affairs.
So for our program, we actually, when I first wrote the grant, I partnered with faculty from political science and psychology. And then as we rolled out the storytelling poster campaign, a social marketing campaign, then we reached out to a professor in our marketing department and as well as our communication department. And so we've been really inclusive and interdisciplinary throughout our programming.
For MSI Fullerton, we have various faculty looped in at different stages starting with our selection process of our scholars. We do have a community that does encompass faculty from different disciplines to biology to African American studies. We also just recently started a pilot program to embed faculty more closely with our cohort of scholars. And so we're starting now with one of our part-time faculties. He's our first success coach, and he's able to follow this third-year cohort to help guide them through the career phase. But it really is about that connection. So how can we continue to bridge that the bridge between student life and faculty? Is always consistency, and more so just really keeping them informed. We have a newsletter where we're able to like put on anybody that wants to learn more about our programs, and they show up to events if they're able to. But research does show the more we can involve faculty, the better I think our students have at accessing that hidden curriculum within the university.
And if I could jump in to add a little bit, I think it's also important for the participants to know that Dr. Acuna is a faculty member in social work at her university. So a small portion of her appointment is managing, running, doing the data collection for their Men of Color program there. So whereas Fullerton, they're in the student affairs side, and they have full-time staff members, administrators working on that, on their efforts at their campus. So although that we're in the same system, we have different models on how we're supporting men of color across the California State University system. There are some individuals that have questions about maybe some possible takeaways or practices that community colleges should think about related to men of color work.
I know we work very closely with Fullerton Community College in tangentially with their recruitment process, but we have been reached out to by various community colleges for campus visits. And so I think that the most consistent piece of advice are there places where the brothers are able to go to on campus? I know in California we have the Umoja program, and that's a huge place for our students to find that community. But just because they're there for such a short amount of time does not mean that they don't still need that community and that sense of belonging that relates to what it means to be a brother and men of color. So I highly recommend for community colleges to connect with the local university who have existing programs, or start one there.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with Dr. Harris. I think that K through 12 community colleges, when we've reached out, they've been very open. They'll take our posters. Our M3 mentors will do presentations. They've talked about starting their own M3 programs, as well as connecting with ours. So yeah, if we can create a K through 12 to higher ed pipeline, then that is certainly the goal.
Great. Here's another question for you all, for both Dr. Harris and Dr. Acuna. What kind of trainings or professional development do you provide for your students and staff to help create an inclusive and culturally competent space/program?
All right, I'll start there. So luckily we're here at Cal State Fullerton, and we have many opportunities for our staff and full-time team to connect with professional development. I think opportunities like this, my team is now viewing this webinar, and I also think that there are other opportunities that happen on campus that we filter out to the team. When it comes to the students though, like, it's the experiences that really matter. So we can get them together as much as possible, and when we can tailor our programming to their needs, I think that's crucial. Oftentimes we have our scholarly gatherings, which is our monthly meetings for our scholarship students. We reserve time to make sure that we bring in a campus partner or a community member to talk about and expand their horizon about what does it mean to be a man and push that envelope. Just a couple weeks ago, they all were outside doing yoga, something that I think that as men, we keep inside one category, but we also bring in financial literacy, and we also bring in IT help, and mental health is really important in there. Once we realize what those conditions are and those needs, we were able to work with our counseling and psychological services department to have a liaison specifically for our men of color here. And that has transformed how they're able to open up.
Yeah, once again, I want to echo Dr. Harris's comments. So the M3 mentors, the grad students who run most of the M3 programs, are part of the MSW, the Masters in Social Work program at Cal State Northridge. And the programs, the mission of our department is intersectionality, social justice, cultural competence, cultural humility, and trauma informed. And so that's really the foundation of their training. Additionally, they get training in cognitive behavioral therapy and other intervention approaches. But I agree that it's really about the experience. It's really about who they are and how they show up in relationships, in their mentoring relationships, that really makes a difference.
Good. All right, good. Thank you so much for that. So someone's asking, like, how have you worked with your campuses to disaggregate data by race?
So I'll start. So I was a school social worker for a long time at Los Angeles Unified School District. And I realized that rather than wait passively for referrals, that we could be really proactive in looking at data that institutions collect. And so when I got here, I approached institutional research and I asked them for a list of all male students of color in our college, the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences. And so they were able to give me a list of all students, undergrad and grad students. And in that list, I could tell their self-reported racial and ethnic identity, their GPA, credits earned. And so I was able to do sorts with that list to really target messages and support to those different groups. So for the last couple of years, I believe we have just in the college, anywhere from 1,000 to 1,400 men of color in our college.
And to echo Dr. Alejandra's responses, that is so true. I really feel like data is where we start, as Greg recommended. Again, at Cal State Fullerton, we're really lucky to have an IR team that is accessible. We can really make a request via online and able to get that within a turnaround time, less than a couple of days sometimes, depending on the size of data you need. And it's really helpful for us to keep track of how many units our brothers are enrolled in, how many classes they are stopping out of. And we use that micro and macro data to help plan out our academic coaching process. We do have a internal specialist, which we're also very thankful to have within our special populations teams, where our department of MSI sits, and that whole team of individual directors work to support the retention effort for the university. And so we have a data specialist who can dive in and do some mining within our own data, and we can discover which type of trends work and drive our own scholars and our fellows. And lastly, we work with the center, a CREAL center on our campus run by Dr. Don Person, and her team are able to really analyze our program structure. So each retreat has been captured, each value empowerment conference has been captured, and now we're working to bring that data into the everyday use of our programming.
And last question, although we have like about another 20 to 30 questions, trying to respect everyone's time, we have about 5 minutes left. And really quickly, in the next week or so, we will upload this webinar to the Pullias Center YouTube channel, and I'll share more information about that. And also the slides we can share with those that have registered as a PDF. One last question, if y'all can answer this one really quickly before I share a few more slides. How are female students incorporated into Men of Color programs?
So for the M3 program, so we get a lot of young women reaching out and say, what about us? Where's a program for us? And we get it. We actually don't turn anybody away, not into our coping and resilience groups, and not into any of our programming. In fact, we have an M3 chill space right next door to this conference room. And when I walk in, I see both M3 mentors and students hanging out who are female. But it's definitely been a question we get asked. It's like, what about us?
Similarly, we have students in our space right now who represent all identity groups. Our hiring practices don't have anything to do with gotta be a man of color, and neither does the selection for our participation in our programs and our scholarships. So we have our young sisters on our staff. We have women who are helping to infuse their support on our committees. And we also don't restrict any type of participation in programs based off of gender and identity. However, we do also have a space on campus for our young sisters called Sister Talk. We have an active women and adult reentry center, and those spaces are well within their right to unapologetically support women, and we mirror our approach to supporting men of color in that same way. Because I often think that both of our identity groups need to continuously be continuous to be shared on campus as priority.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one more thing. What I noticed in supervising M3 mentors is that if the M3 mentor was a female, it seemed as if there was a trend that our M3 mentees felt more comfortable being vulnerable and disclosing. And I'm not sure if that's because society has deemed it okay to be vulnerable for men around women versus other men. But I have to say also that being a woman advocate for male success programs, it's been also challenging because even though my colleagues like Dr. Ricks, Dr. Martinez, Dr. Lipscomb all talk about having women as mentors throughout their academic journey, whenever I present, I'm a little nervous because there's always at least one comment about, I'd much rather hear this information from another man, which is why I brought my team to like back me up here. But David wanted to say something.
So in addition to this, being able to hold spaces for women, for mujeres of color within higher education spaces, you do notice that women of color are graduating at a higher rate than males of color, right? And then you do have mentors and gente like Dr. Acuna here, who would advocate and bring the struggle of males on their back just to help us get ahead. So being able to break that hypermasculine, that masculine structure that we hold so high in society is crucial. And I've worked with mujeres mentees. I've worked with women mentees, women mentors, and they've taught me more that I could learn about myself than I could ever learn by myself, right? So it's crucial of also being able to support our women of color and mujeres of color. So it's being able to open up the space to women is only right.
I completely agree, brother. Just to add, like our program at Fullerton was started by our women on campus faculty and staff. And in fact, Dr. Sunny Foy was a leader in this, and there was a woman of color. So it's important to always note that women were always at the forefront of this work and still need to be included at all times.
And so thank you everyone for participating in the webinar. I just want to do quick next steps for USC Pullias. So if you're interested in learning more about the research that we're doing about men of color, next month I am presenting a paper focusing on 3 of the 5 campuses and the type of work that they're doing to validate students. We are also providing a literature review scan, which is going to be like a summary of various best practices to support men of color based on the readings of 50+ journal articles and policy briefs. And this fall, we are releasing a toolkit for practitioners that are looking to create men of color programs or working with men of color programs. It's kind of think of it like a menu of different options and things that you can do to support your students on your campuses. I definitely ask you to consider following us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn to see all the different tools and resources that we're going to provide. We are also hosting another webinar later this summer, early fall, so you can get access to more information about this. We would like to say thank you so much. Please consider following myself or my colleagues here on social media. We also want to say thank you to the ECMC Foundation, ACPA, California State University Northridge and Fullerton for sharing their perspectives and the work that they're doing with men of color, the USC Rossier School of Education, and of course to the 300+ participants from around the country. So quick shout outs to Boston College, University of Delaware, Casper College in Wyoming, University of Wisconsin, Green Bay for sharing a piece of your day with us. And I would also like to thank my team for all their help and support to make this webinar possible. I hope everyone has a good rest of the day and thank you so much.